What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Tradesmen Talks, where we like to bring up tips and ideas, different approaches and strategies on how you can build or grow your trade-based business. And that's exactly what we're going to do today.
Heck yeah.
Another week, another video. So how's it going, Wilson?
It's going good, man. We had some really great things happen. I don't know if I bragged on this. I got a text message from my partner saying, "Hey man, collected $25,000 in the last 3 days." So, I always like that text. That's a great text. I want to get one of those.
Especially for a smaller operation, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Things are we've worked really hard and pushed really fast to get to the point where the crews are going steadily, and we have two guys that are consistent, we can trust. And so now the bank account's building back up so that we can prepare for the next stage. So everything is going according to plan.
That's great. Yeah, well, today I thought we could go into the benefits of really prioritizing the sales side of the business. And so it's great you brought up a great example of a sale week or a couple days for you, for your team over there in Texas. And a lot of contractors I find don't necessarily have a healthy balance of focusing their attention on operations versus sales, or providing their service versus filling up their pipeline with high quality and high paying jobs.
Yep.
And so I wanted to dive into that a little bit. And, I'm sure there'll be some nuggets that pop up.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So, I was at a conference this last weekend with a business expert guy that's doing really great stuff. And the business that they focus on is different than what we do, but it's funny because you see the parallels. And one of the things that he was talking about, because there's some newer people in business, he's like, raise your hand if you're stuck on the sales fulfillment seesaw, right? Like you spend all your time doing sales, then you book up a whole bunch of jobs, and you're so excited, but but no, I have to go do those jobs. So you do those jobs, and then all of a sudden there's no sales, and you're struggling, wondering how bills are going to be made. And the number of hands that went up was, not surprising, but it's indicative. It's a problem that a lot of people face,
Right.
Because it's tough,
especially for smaller operations, because there's only so many people in the business. And so if things aren't distributed properly, you're going to create that imbalance, and you're going to find yourself in emergency mode. And if you try to do sales while you're desperate or stressing out about the results of those sales appointments, it will dramatically impact the results.
Yeah.
And you're going to carry yourself in a different way if you really need that job. But you don't want to be completely indifferent. You want to focus on building a connection with the customer. And out of that genuine connection, you'll be able to develop trust, and from the homeowner's perspective, a willingness to hire you. And so let's go into that a little bit more. I know we've worked with people that have smaller teams, and they find themselves working on these job sites for quite a bit. And maybe they have homeowners that they've met with in the past, give them a call and say, "Hey, we're ready to move forward. What's the next steps?" And it can be interesting to hear for some people that contractor that's receiving these calls from these homeowners who are interested in hiring them, that contractor will sometimes delay receiving those deposits, or delay going out there and meeting with them again to answer their last questions and collect that deposit.
Right.
And it's something that is not a good habit you want to let build up too much. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, when you're leading by example and your team is watching you do this, when you go to try to grow your business, they're going to start to envelop those habits that you're showcasing to them. And if you're not prioritizing collecting payments, they're not going to either. And that can sometimes trickle down into even when you finish the jobs. If you have a team that's performing the services your business provides, and they finish the job, and they may not prioritize doing what's needed to collect that final balance because they don't see you prioritizing collecting the deposits. Right. And it's something that's easily avoidable, but dramatically impactful to the business. And as we know, cash flow is super important. And one thing that some contractors may not realize is you can generate oftentimes more cash flow with your collection of deposits than you can with the fulfillment of your service, especially if you're a small operation with one guy, two guys, or you're working on the job sites. You can only finish so many projects in that week, but you can often collect a lot more deposits in the same amount of time. And depending on your structure, with our businesses, we like to encourage people to collect 50% up front. And so if you're a window installer, or you're a countertop installer, or you're a flooring installer, it's not uncommon for these type of businesses to ask for 50% up front.
Right.
And by doing that, you're able to collect potentially 3, 4, 5 deposits in that week, but maybe your teams are only capable of finishing 1 or 2 jobs that week. And so if you prioritize selling, you can often generate more cash flow than what your teams can on fulfilling.
Yep. Well, so that's it. That's a huge part of it. But even in places, so, like our large part of our solar operations in California. In California, I don't think you can take more than 10% before the project is 50% completed.
Okay.
Because California. But, the really interesting thing is, separate from that, even if you don't have the ability to sell your way ahead, the reality is, if you're not staying on top of those sales, as soon as you find yourself in a famine mode, right, when things are tight because you don't have any jobs in the future, what that means is you're more likely to take lower paying jobs or to give lower bids than you would otherwise. And so what happens is the money that you now have coming in the future is less than what it should have been, because you based your pricing based on how much you needed the job, not based on what the job was worth. And so you see these people then undercutting themselves. And so then they aren't making any profit margin, and they're just constantly behind. And it is, it's like, if you're constantly putting out fires, it's very hard to fireproof your home.
Yeah.
Yep. And so
and it's not sustainable. It's a great way to find yourself burning out.
Yeah. It's so not sustainable. And we see so many people that have that burnout for that exact reason. But no matter how you look at it, the sales part is oftentimes more important than delivery in terms of like the extension and continuation of your business. The other thing with sales is it's harder to find someone to replace that part of your business than it is the delivery, especially for a lot of technical work. Like, it is easier for me to find somebody that I trust to learn how to paint than somebody I trust to go into a customer's home and sell that job.
Right. And represent your company, your brand, and your entire team.
100%. Because the reality is they're not going to care quite as much as you do.
Right.
And
that's a great point. Sorry to cut you off.
No.
But aside from the financial benefit of always selling, there's the relationship side. Our small businesses are heavily reliant on the relationships that we form. And so if you are not prioritizing that side of the business and you're putting more focus on the fulfillment, then you're losing some opportunities to create more relationships that can offer referrals, more relationships that can offer potential, other relationships that can form into bringing in more business. And when you bring in more business, it gives you more ability to hire more technicians, because now you have more confidence and certainty around the incoming revenue.
Right.
And so it gives you a little bit more confidence and extends that runway as well.
Yeah. Well, because you think about it. So like a person does a great job with the sales. And when I think of sales in small, especially like home services businesses, the sales is not just the part where you go and you collect the money, although that part's awesome. Right. Like, we all love it, right? That part's fun. But it's everything leading up to it. It's everything after it. Like, your salesperson is oftentimes going to be the one that's responsible for helping make sure you get reviews, helping make sure you get referrals. And you can train techs to do that. But if the salesperson is managing that relationship well, they're going to have a better job and a better time doing it. And if the salesperson is the one getting the testimonials on camera, it's going to be better, because the next person that sees them in their home is going to be that person. And so when you look at somebody doing a mediocre job with the sales process, and mediocre job with the reviews process, and mediocre job with the referrals process, the damage from that is way worse than somebody doing a mediocre job with the painting. Because if a guy does a mediocre job with the painting, I can send somebody back in, I can touch it up and I can fix it and make it look good, right? I can't just go send a new person behind the original person and be like, hey, you've never met me before, but do you want to give us a review?
Right. Mediocre job in sales is going to create a residual problem on getting more projects.
Yeah, it's disproportionate damage.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that we encourage a lot of smaller businesses. And when we say small, a lot of our partners, including ourselves, multiple seven-figure businesses with a very small team. Yep. And small enough to where you as the owner can manage the reputation. You as the owner can be that salesperson and be in a more sustainable position in your business, because let's say you're a tradesperson and you decide you want to start a business around your trade. Well, as you get older, it's going to potentially become harder for you to fulfill the same quality at the same pace. Yep. And it may not be a long-term position for you, even if you want to hire a salesperson and do all of that, because you're a super introverted person, or whatever the reason may be, you don't want to do sales. It might be a position that you want to grow into because you can better maintain the reputation. You can make a great living by going out there, creating relationships, having conversations with homeowners that are interested in your service. And even better, because you were that tradesperson, you can answer all of those technical questions. And over time, you'll get more comfortable speaking to these homeowners and be able to create more relationships. Yep. And you could be in that sales role / management role while you continue to have technicians and other people doing the fulfillment.
Yeah. Well, and, I always get annoyed when people are like, well, I don't want to do sales because I'm introverted, because I think introversion and sales are completely unrelated, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't consider myself an extroverted person in any way, shape, or form, but I've learned the skill of how to sell people and the skill of needing to be knowing how to be effectively social when it's time to be social, right? Because it's what puts bread on the table, right? Your ability to talk to people, that's what brings in the money. And it's like anything else. It's like there was a stage at every contractor's development where they weren't good at, no painter is born knowing how to paint.
Sure. Right.
No salesperson was born knowing how to be good at sales. I know lots of extroverted people that love to talk. They're absolutely horrible salespeople.
Right. They'll just talk forever and then never ask for the sale.
Yeah. Or not ask any questions at all. I think a powerful thing about sales, part of the reason introverts do really well is because an effective sales process involves effective questions. If I'm doing good at my job, hopefully I don't have to talk that much because you're talking for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But changing that paradigm for a lot of those people, I think prevents that from happening. Or it's usually that, or they have some weird, I don't say weird because a lot of people have it, but they have a negative belief about sales that does not serve them.
Right.
And that drives me crazy. See guys that go, oh, I don't want to be a car salesman. I'm like, good, don't. But it doesn't mean you can't sell.
Right. And you can go into these because it's likely that your trade-based business is somewhat focused. Unless you're just like a broad handyman, you probably are somewhat focused, whether that's installing windows, flooring, even welding, or, you have a specific service that you provide. You can go into these sales appointments, if we want to call them that, and have a fixed set of questions. And so all you have to do is go in there and have some cordial conversation and then just flow naturally into the questions as if you're almost giving a survey. And if you have some effective questions, as Wilson pointed out, you'll notice the homeowner does most of the talking. And by them having that, being in that dynamic of them talking and them feeling heard, and you asking questions and being genuinely curious about what they want, what they're looking for, you're going to create an impression that makes the sale very likely. And so even if you don't like sales, if you can just remember a set of questions that takes a very little time to learn, you can be a very successful salesperson, and the learning curve can be very short. And it's a very financially rewarding position, especially if you own the company, because now you're not having to pay a salesperson and you have a lot of control over what your company is promising. Because I'll tell you, hiring salespeople can be great because you can have multiple people out in the field bringing in jobs every day. But a lot of salespeople that don't own the company, they're going to say yes to everything. And they may not necessarily effectively communicate to the company what they are promising these customers. And there's a disconnect or a miscommunication somewhere because these salespeople, they're incentivized to get the deposit. And so they're going to sometimes say whatever they may feel like saying in order to have the customer be confident enough to give them a deposit check. And so they may make some false promises. But if you, as the business owner, you have all the context of what it takes to fulfill on the service that your company provides, and then you have a set of questions to give you a framework for these sales appointments, it becomes a really fun role because you're just kind of driving around every day, having these conversations, collecting checks, which feels really good.
Oh yeah.
And you know you're giving your business enough fuel to keep growing or to keep on pace with where you want to be. And you know that you have confidence around what you're promising the customers. And you have a great work-life balance usually in that role. I remember when I was growing Elite Cabinet Coatings and I found myself in the position of sales. You know, I started off doing the jobs and doing everything, but then I was able to have some help and bring in teams. So I was the salesperson and other guys did the actual labor aspect.
Right.
And I would go to sales appointments in between. You know, I go and get food. I'll go to the driving range, go to the gun range, you know, just like I'm able to do things in between these appointments. It was a great work-life balance. And it was, you know, it was two guys and me, and we were bringing in, you know, $500,000 to 750,000 that year. And it was a very low stress environment.
Right.
Now I decided to double down on the business and grow and build the team. So I didn't have to really do any of the day-to-day roles and responsibilities. And we were able to grow the business and all of that. But you can create a very good life for yourself by just growing yourself out of the fulfillment.
Right.
And where you're just doing the sales, you have a few guys. One of my friends does this with windows. We're going to have him on the podcast one day. He has a window company. He does the sales. He has one full-time installer for windows and one part-time installer. They're going to do well over $1 million this year.
Wow.
And he's an extroverted person, so he absolutely loves it.
Right.
He has a framework because he's gone to so many appointments, but now it's just nothing more than going to these houses. He loves meeting people, but his primary goal is to ask certain questions, to answer their concerns or speak to their concerns. He collects these deposit checks, and it's great. He's got a 7-figure business with, you know,
guys,
1.5 employees.
Right. Right. Which is a great problem to have. Well, you know, it's interesting. So two things I thought were kind of unique there. One is, like, in my experience, guys that don't start with a framework or a script that survive long enough in sales to really make it into a full-time career, they all end up with a framework or a script. And It's amazing how much they follow the same process. Right. Which is fine. Like, you can go reinvent the wheel. It's just, there's no premium for it. You know, like, you don't get paid extra because you create something that already exists. But separate from that, like, when you look at your growth trajectory there, a lot of guys think that, well, I don't really like sales, but I'm going to grow my business in other ways. The truth is, you're going to be selling in your business, even if you're not doing sales in your business. Like, you're selling guys on why they want to work with you, not somewhere else. You're selling guys on what their level of progression is in the business. You know, you're selling other businesses on why they want to refer your services. Like, you can't escape sales and succeed in business. So you should just save yourself the headache and just learn it. You know, so there's no point in fighting it. It's one of those things you can't do. If you don't like sales, you probably aren't going to like business. Just learn how to love it.
Absolutely. And you can love the rewards. You can love what comes from effectively having a sales framework. And I love the way you put it, where it's more or less a set of questions. Yeah. You know, when you're hiring and you're selling your mission and your vision of why people should work for you, oftentimes, what does it start with? An interview. That's a list of questions. You know, when you're selling your service to these homeowners, it should start with a list of questions. You know, it's really not that much more complicated than just having specific questions that give people the path of least resistance. And that speaks to how a lot of people who don't have a framework, they end up with a framework, because throughout the path of least resistance, you may unconsciously realize, oh, when I ask these questions, I tend to get more deals.
Right.
And so you just by default naturally start to ask these questions over and over, and you realize, okay, the positive feedback is there and this works, so I'm going to keep doing this. And that's more or less what sales is, guys. And if you're doing more talking than questioning, it's not that doesn't mean you're not going to get the sale, but you're certainly using more energy in order to get that sale. And if you just reel it back into asking more questions, you're going to find that your sales process is a lot less intimidating. It's a lot more enjoyable, and it's certainly a lot more rewarding because you're going to be closing more deals.
Yeah. Well, and for people that are like not sure what their framework should look like there's two things. Anytime I've helped somebody start in sales, there's always two things I want them to do. One is I want them to redefine their definition, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, what's sales? Like, oh, that's where you convince somebody they want something, which is right. Horribly true. Like if you've ever had a girlfriend, you're not convincing them that they want something unless they want it first. That's not how that works, right? Or at least not in my house. And so it's like, okay, well, what's a better way of looking at it? Like you are finding a need and then presenting a solution to that need. If the need doesn't exist, the solution doesn't exist. And when it's that case, it's more just like, what's the puzzle, right? Like I know this person has some kind of need. What is it? If it's an employee, like, okay, they need to make X number of dollars so they can provide for their family. Like we've got the need. How do we create an exchange of value? If it's a homeowner, like they need a kitchen that's not ugly. Awesome. We make beautiful kitchens. Like it's really simple when you change the definition and you shorten it down to what it is, but you cannot convince another human to do anything they don't want to do unless you're the government and it's tax time. That's just the truth. Right.
Yeah.
And so given that that's the case, it's like, if you look at that framework, I imagine, and maybe we talk about some of those, like Stephen, what are some of the questions that you find yourself always asking these sales appointments? And how would you say that translates to even some like the hiring situations?
So, yeah, that's a great question. And when I approach a homeowner with my business, Elite Cabinet Coatings, we know when we're in that home, at that point, we know what their need is.
Yeah.
And so now we're asking why you need it. We're asking these. So why are you having me here today, Ms. Smith? What has you deciding on what contractor, or how do you go about deciding on which contractor you're going to be hiring for this project? Literally just asking them their thought process. What are you looking for in a contractor to do this project for you? What are your priorities with having your cabinets refinished? Do you know the difference between us and other home providers or home service providers? Do you know the difference? And by asking these questions, it opens up for you to answer them. And you can plug in your business into what they're looking for, and they will tell you exactly what they're looking for. And more often than not, you can fit that mold. Yep. And it's going to give you some insight into what you might need to do, or what you might need to communicate to your team in order to address their priorities. Maybe it's timeline, maybe it's budget, maybe it's warranty. Maybe it's the feeling of needing to get a good deal. A lot of homeowners have that. They know who you are at that point. If you're at the home and you've done a great job at giving them some information before you showed up to the house, they've seen your reviews already. They've seen your website. They maybe have seen some videos on your Facebook page. And so it a lot of times comes down to them feeling like they got a good deal. And they may not tell you that, but you can ask questions that uncover that. But a big one is
point there.
Yeah.
A good deal does not necessarily mean a low price.
No. Definitely does not.
Just in case anybody was wondering, that's not what Stephen's saying. It's not a good deal.
We often provide good deals without lowering our price.
Mm-hmm.
There's a value exchange that can be a win-win. And we try to figure out how we can bring in more value without bringing in less money. And often we can do that in our business. For example, providing free soft close hinges.
Right.
We can do that, and we will budget in the quote for those soft close hinges, but we will provide a proposal that shows how they are getting them discounted, or we can provide an extended warranty.
Yep.
Or we can provide a expedited start date, or we can offer if they do insist on getting a discount, sometimes homeowners, they just want that discount. Well, great. Miss Smith, would you be willing to leave us a review in exchange for a discount upon completion? This is going to be our price. If you feel confident and happy with our work and you leave us a review, we'd be happy to provide you a rebate.
Yep.
Things like that. There's things you can exchange that creates a win-win without necessarily lowering the profit or the revenue. But a big part of the questioning thing is just asking them what their process is. What are you looking for in a contractor for this project? And then you just speak to those things that they bring up.
So how do you find yourself prioritizing sales? Like when it was just you, right? And you were having to do all of the delivery. And, there was one point where you were doing, 2 jobs a week by yourself, which is, so bordering on ridiculous. It's kind of funny. In times like that, where you were, working that much, how did you prioritize that? Right. How did you think about the tasks in front of you? Because I know for a lot of people, and this is something that, I'm training our students on all the time, is like, look, guys, you have 1 million tasks. You're only going to get to 900,000 of them. Right. And that's just how you're going to feel. But you have to make sure you're getting to the right tasks, not the most tasks. So how did you usually think about that?
Well, it almost seemed natural to me at the beginning to prioritize cash flow, partly because I was broke.
That helps.
And so I wanted to generate money. And, that was one of my motivations for starting the business. I did not think cabinets was going to be my thing. I didn't think it was going to be a long-term play. I thought it was going to be a short-term, like a transitional fuel source for me.
Well, and are you saying that you haven't always been a millionaire? You didn't start that way?
No, definitely not. And so at the beginning, I wanted to bring in as much cash as possible. And so when I was doing everything in the business, I was, and for context, for those who are listening, our average project is completed within a week. And so it got to the point where I was doing 2 jobs in a week by going job site to job site back and forth, working through the weekends and doing sales sometimes while paint is drying. I'd be waiting on a coat to dry. And so that's when I can follow up with leads. That's when I can send emails, phone calls, things like that, or even go to a sales appointment. And, you could describe it as the hustling phase. And so though I wasn't necessarily the cleanest when I would come into these sales appointments, because I'd have paint on me, I'd be in my work clothes, I'd still have my logo and stuff on it, but I would just make it a strength. Some people might think that that's a weakness, not being able to look presentable or professional, but I was just showcasing my willingness to get things done and make do with what I had, and including the time. And so I let them know I have some paint drying right now, and I prioritize being here when I said I was going to be here. And so I'm happy to answer your questions and go over our process. And that's how I did it, obviously as short as possible, or I was in that phase for as little as possible. It's not sustainable to work like that. But my reasoning was just prioritizing cash flow because I was broke. And now you get to a point where that's not necessarily the case. And so how do you prioritize it then? Well, I realized I had a whole team that relied on this business producing enough fuel to keep everyone fed. Yep. These people rely on the decisions that I make every day. And if I decide to take off a day or to not prioritize cash flow, meaning going to the sales appointments when I'm available, then it can affect them. Right. I'd rather create the longest runway as I can with a pipeline of deals. And so being booked out for 2 months, 3 months was a great spot for me. And then I just kept doing that, and I would bring in all these deposits that I can reinvest into the business or do whatever I'd like with. There isn't as much of a fulfillment cost or overhead cost with the deposits that you're bringing in, even if it's not 50% and it's 30%, because that's what I started with. I didn't start with 50% until I realized it was just as easy for me to collect 50% than it was 25%.
Right.
So I started collecting 50%.
Yeah,
that gives me a lot more. Yeah, that gave me a lot more cash flow up front that I can then go and hire people. I can reinvest in more marketing. I can buy a truck with, whatever. And so, yeah, that's how I learned to prioritize cash flow, because I recognize that it's the blood of the business. And
Yes.
once I realized that I am able to close more deals than I am to complete them, then it made more sense to always be selling, all try to sell as much as possible. And then, I got to the point where I had two salespeople, and that was great. But yeah, that was my thought process around it.
One thing that's nice about doing it that way, because I think for like we all of us tend to be creatures of habit. And so if you formed the habit of focusing on delivery first, sometimes it'd be hard to transition. Like, I've had guys be like, oh yeah, I had my phone on vibrate and I didn't hear it because I was, spraying. I was like, well, why would you ever have your phone on vibrate if you think there are potential sales calls coming in?
Right.
It's like little things like that where, if you didn't sit down and decide that sales was going to be your priority, the outcome's the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that outcome is basically the business being harder. There's no doubt about it. Business is so much harder when you don't have money.
Yeah, there could be some existential reasons on why people don't prioritize collecting cash flow, because we've spoken with people who have a list of homeowners that have called them back saying, hey, we want to hire you. What are the next steps? And that business owner delays collecting those deposits.
Right.
And they can't necessarily afford not collecting those deposits, but yet there's a delay for unobvious reasons. And so, there might be some inner work that needs to be done. And maybe there's some fears around money, depending on, some people react or think about money differently, but it is the blood of your business. And especially if you have other people on your team, they rely on your decisions. And so the ramifications of delaying collecting cash is impacting them, and it's not fair to them. So even if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for them.
Yeah. Well, it's weird, money, when you say that, it's something I was thinking about this last weekend. Like for some people, money is this iconic symbol of, I don't know what. I was having a conversation with the lady, and she was like, well, I really want to make all this money so I can invest and I can get these other 3 businesses. And I was like, awesome. What do you want to do with those businesses? She's like, well, I was hoping to invest and get this other business. And I was like, great. And what do you want to do with those businesses? And she's like, I don't know. I don't know what business I want after that. I'm like, yeah, but you're going to collect all of this money for what? You're not going to put it in a bathtub like Scrooge McDuck and go swim around in it. So you hopefully have some higher purpose and intention for this money. And so like if people would quit looking at money as money and start thinking of it as fuel, right? Like if you're trying to get somewhere and you need gasoline to get there, you're going to do whatever it takes to go get the gasoline, but you're not going to like put the gasoline up on a shelf and be like, oh, look at my gasoline. Right. Now, if prices keep raising like they're raising, you might, right? but currently nobody thinks about it that way. It's like, hey, I need to go on this trip. This is the fuel I need to get there. And I wish people would think about money for their businesses the same way they do fuel for their car, because that's what it is. It's a tool that enables you to go somewhere.
Right. And some people are scared to ask as well, because they might find themselves in an appointment with the goal of giving this homeowner a quote or a bid.
Oh God, yeah.
And they don't actually ask for the sale because maybe there's some intimidation on the rejection, or there's some inner beliefs around, as you mentioned, money. There might be some symbolism to money. Some people are taught that money is evil.
Yeah.
And they're forced to, or they have been programmed to think that they have to work super hard for money. And if they find themselves not working hard, then they think there's something wrong. And so they find themselves throwing away their money somehow to keep them in a position of having to work super hard.
Allow me to create a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've actually caught myself in that position, or at least a version of that, where, you get so used to needing money and to be in a position of scarcity to where you'll unconsciously keep yourself there sometimes. And if you don't catch yourself and work on creating a new normal for yourself, you're going to waste your money in times that you shouldn't be. And you're going to find yourself always needing to work hard or always needing to be in a position of hustling, even though you have really successful businesses. And fortunately, I caught myself. But some people, there's definitely people that are brought up in a way to where their perception on money was developed outside of their control. And so once they grab control over how they think about money, it can often really impact the way they go about producing it.
Well, there's a good question. So are there any books or tools or resources that have impacted the way you think about money?
None that really come to I mean,
We should do a whole episode on this, actually.
I've read books like Think and Grow Rich. Like there's books that I've read that helped shape my business perspective. And money obviously is an instrumental part of business. But I would say it really came down to the recognition that money is fuel. And you have the ability to control your business and make it more efficient as well. So unlike a car, you're not stuck with what you got.
Right.
And you can create a more efficient vehicle that gets you where you're trying to go in life. And if you look at your business as a vehicle of trying to get closer to your other goals, and you look at the cash flow being the fuel that gets you there, it creates a new paradigm. It creates a new way about looking at your business and how to get it to your next level in life. But I do want to touch on the fact that a lot of contractors go into these appointments almost scared, or they justify not asking for the job or asking for the deposit. And I want to offer a simple solution to that, rather than saying, so what do you think? Or rather than saying, do you want to hire me? Though that's probably better than nothing at all. Yep. At least continue the conversations and let the homeowner hire you. But I would often ask people to approach it like reserving your start date. When we reserve our start dates for these customers, it automatically comes with the assumption of giving us the deposit.
Right.
And so rather than asking for the deposit, you can ask for the start date. And it's a subtle distinction that, in my experience and other people that we've coached and helped, it's a less intimidating question.
Yep.
So when would you like to get started? It's a lot easier than saying, can you write me a check? For some people, it's a lot easier to ask, when would you like to get started? And we've had cabinet startup students. So for those watching, we have a program where we show people every part of the business, including the sales appointments. We will bring them to the appointments with us. And I remember I had Taylor, they're up in Tennessee. And I took him and his dad to some sales appointments, and Taylor, the son, came in with me. And we went through the process, asked them questions, showed them colors, and I just wrote up the quote, put it next to them in front of them, put my pen down and said, so when would you like to get started? And we just sat there for like 45 seconds, dead silent, looking at them.
The best part.
We looked at them while they're looking at the paper. And they said, and then they just gave us a date. Well, can you get started July 6th or whatever it was? I don't remember the date, but it was just such a smooth thing. It felt so good because it couldn't have been a better example of what is possible.
Right.
Because a lot of people who don't have experience with building a home service business, and especially not having sales experience, they don't realize how easy it can be. They have these limiting beliefs or these intimidations about sales. A lot of these can be really smooth and really easy if you ask the right questions and you go in there with, the intention of helping them. And it often can come down to just asking them when they would like to get started. So for those who may have some hesitations around going to these homeowners and trying to lock in that deal,
yep,
go through your process, ask them the questions, get a good understanding of what they want and make sure that you can provide and fulfill their expectations. And then simply ask them, when would you like to get started? Or, well, it sounds like you could approach it like saying, well, Ms. Smith, it sounds like you are really excited to have this project done. I think we answered all your questions, and I really believe we can help you and provide a good experience. We do have an opening for July 7th. And then just stop.
Yeah, if you really want to be a badass, you can say, "Hey, we've got an opening on the 7th or the 14th. Which would work better for you?" Give them a choice of two positives.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah, put them in a position of control.
Yeah. Right. When would you like to win? Would you like to win on the day that I win or the day that I win? It's yeah. It's interesting because right now in our program, I think we teach 5 different variations of that close because some people really feel comfortable with choice two's positive. Some people feel good with assumptive closes. Some people feel good with, just a super direct question asking. But, the reality is you have to have a plan either way, right? If you're going into it and you're like, well, I'll just get to it and we'll see what happens. Statistically, what's going to happen is you're going to take the path of least resistance, which is leaving a proposal and walking out of there broke. And that's a really, it's the least resistance right now, but God, if it's not the most resistance in the rest of your life, right? I don't know what it is. It's so much harder to struggle.
Absolutely. And giving the customer the path of least resistance can often help as well. If you are, as the sales representative, willing to at least lay out the next step for the homeowner, it can give them less friction and less obstacles to go through rather than saying, okay, well, here's the price. Give us a call if you have any questions. Thank you for your time.
Right.
Now you're requiring them to call you. And not only do they need to continue to think about it, because when you leave, they're programmed to think about it. They got to talk to people. They got to look you up again and compare you to other people.
If they actually will, because there's a decent chance that the next person that comes in and just has the balls to close them is going to get the deal.
Yeah, I agree. If you're not the first person in there, though, there might be some comparison. But if you create that path of least resistance, ride that high energy wave. If you created a good connection and you asked the right questions and you had the homeowner talking to you, giving them those potential start dates is a way to just ease them through the door, that path of least resistance. And then when they pick their start date, the deposit is naturally the next step. And it doesn't become this high tense sales moment. It's just like, okay, well, great. As we talked about, or as you can see, we asked for a 30% deposit or a 50% deposit to reserve your start date. How would you like to use a check or a card?
Yep. Now, worth mentioning, if you follow this process, it is important that you have that next step of collecting the deposit, because a signed agreement with no deposit and a start date very likely is not a signed agreement. It's not, there's a good chance they flake. Good chance they flake. But it makes asking for the check is so much easier once they've already said, I want to start on this day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it removes the biggest barrier to entry. And after that, they almost want to. They're like, yeah, okay, so do I need to give you money now? Like, what do we do?
Yeah, they're excited. They've chosen the start date. Yep. And so that comes with the automatic acknowledgement that they've chosen you. They like what you've said. They like your process and product and people. And now they've chosen the start date. So now it's excited. Let's lock it in, Ms. Smith. Would you like to use check or card?
Yeah, love it.
So yeah, we do got a call coming up. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up there, guys. Hopefully this was some value to you in regards to sales and how to approach thinking about sales in your business. It's important not only with collecting deposits, but also selling the vision, asking the right questions in your interview so you really can meet expectations, not only with your team, but same approach with your customers. And if you really carry that priority all the way through the journey of growing your business, you're going to find yourself creating a much more healthy business, and one that could even be working for you rather than you working so much for it. And if you have any questions around this topic or anything else, really, send us an email at support@cabinetstartup.com. Regardless of what trade you're in, a lot of the challenges are very similar. So we'd be happy to help you think about your challenge in a way that hopefully brings you a solution. And anything at all, shoot us an email at support@cabinetstartup.com. And we'll talk to you guys same place, same time next week.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good one.